Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of a brand new podcast series from Product Coalition. My name's Jay Stansell and really excited to get a brand new podcast series underway. This series is all going to be based around Melbourne product people, and I'm really glad to get this going. Just firstly want to give a big shout out to the location sponsor where we are today. We're at Proud Mary Coffee. Proud Mary is a specialty coffee roaster, cafe, coffee educator and retailer based in Melbourne, Australia, and also Portland, Oregon in the USA. I'm personally fortunate to be part of the Proud Mary story and to help these guys out. So a big thanks to all of the Proud Mary coffee team here in Melbourne and over in Portland. To find out any more about Proud Mary in Australia, visit proudmarycoffee.com.au, or if you're over in the US, proudmarycoffee.com. But I personally recommend getting down to both of the cafes in Portland and Melbourne to really experience what Proud Mary is all about. And my top tip is go for the potato hash. I want to introduce Keat Yong to everyone. Welcome, Keat. Thanks for kicking off this series.
Thanks, Jay. It's super exciting to be here.
I'm looking forward to chatting to you today about, we're going to talk about a product mindset when you're not a product manager. I think it's going to be really interesting. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your journey through career, life?
Sure. So, look, from a career standpoint, I started out in software development. So that was really my bag. Did that for many years as a consultant. Then I started managing teams and went through that sort of, management, senior management kind of pathway. Then I ended up at IAG, where we worked together, where we met.
Indeed.
And I was doing lots of process stuff, and then moved into a really interesting role, which is probably the sort of the start of my product journey. Was very much around the guilds team that we were working in. So it's focused on social learning, but we took a very, very hypothesis-driven and experimental approach to actually how we would roll out capability uplift across, 1,000 people. So that's really where I am. And so I moved on from IAG 6 months ago, and now I'm effectively a product owner for a capability uplift offering in my new gig at my new organisation, which is a consulting organisation as well.
Fantastic. Loved it when someone's been on the tools and worked all the way through into capability. So before we jump into a product mindset, it is a Melbourne-based series, so let's smash out your Melbourne knowledge.
Sure.
Favourite tea or coffee joint?
Favourite tea. So my favourite coffee place, we've just moved buildings down into Docklands, and I found a shop that the first day that we moved into our new digs in Docklands, there was a new coffee shop opening called Upstanding Citizens, and they are amazing. So really, really great coffee. Really, really nice people. And they have an Instagram account at upstandingcitizens_Melbourne. Go and have a look. They have great, tea, coffee, and amazing snacks. Amazing
Coffee is
snacks.
important for living and working in Melbourne. For anyone who doesn't know, Melbourne loves its coffee. Similarly, favourite lunch venue in the CBD?
To be honest, it's all about dumplings. Melbourne.
Nice, yeah.
So our team is, we're all massive dumplings fans. So any opportunity we can get to go and smash plates of dumplings, that's what we do. So we're actually running a tally for the organisation at the moment. So we're counting the number of dumplings. We've got a target for the year.
Metrics matter.
Yeah, we've got to measure, absolutely.
Your best tram route?
Best tram route? So I grew up on the 72 line.
Nice.
Which is nice. It takes a really winding journey from sort of Camberwell through Glen Iris, which is where I grew up, and then all the way through down past Chapel Street and Commercial Road, and then up St Kilda Road, up past the Arts Centre and stuff. So that's probably my favourite.
Cool. Yeah. Favourite meetup in Melbourne or conference?
I don't know how. I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but I run a meetup group.
Yeah, no, please. Yeah.
So I run the Melbourne Agile Delivery Managers
Group, or
MAD Managers, as we call ourselves. and it's essentially for people who who are delivery managers in software delivery teams in Melbourne, and we basically get together and have a chat about all the things that are specific to the delivery manager and that role. That's very much my background and very much where I feel comfortable.
Nice.
And it's very much social, although we started really focusing on having focusing questions. So not necessarily serious presentations, although we've had a few of them, but it's mostly about just discussion, right? Have a focusing question and people can come in and think about when they've tackled specific challenges and then share with the group, right? And that feeds back into that sort of social learning guilds kind of mentality and role that I had previously as well.
Awesome. What was the name of the group again? Sorry, Keat?
The Melbourne Agile Delivery Managers.
And on meetup.com?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, you've passed your Melbourne test.
Yes.
Okay, so today we wanted to have a chat together about product mindset when you're not technically, as a job description or whatever, a product manager. So you mentioned earlier that in your new job you are a product owner, and you're bringing day-to-day that product mindset. Could you tell us a bit more about the product and the journey you've been on so far?
Sure. So when I started the conversation, so this is a company that I joined. It was a sort of a 40-person startup, and their core mission was around DevOps and consulting in the DevOps space. So essentially, they would work with organisations where they didn't have any cloud capability, and we would come in, roll something out, and then hand it over nominally, and then we would go off to the next consulting gig. So what became really apparent and really clear was that over time, as we started going back into those companies, we noticed that they actually hadn't really taken on and utilised the capability that we'd implemented for them. So we'd build these platforms and make it really easy for them to spin up new infrastructure, and they could spin up and try stuff, but they never really took it on and never really did it. So what really then became clear is there was a need to actually, off the back end of a consulting engagement where we deliver some new infrastructure, was actually some education and capability uplift and changing the mindset of the people who were there. The biggest difficulty with implementing new things is actually having the incumbent people actually take that on and own it themselves, right? Humans naturally will sort of protect the knowledge that they have, and they will fight and resist any change because change means they're out of their comfort zone, they're in a new space, they may not have the experience and knowledge that they've built up over years and years and years, and to them that's their value to the organisation. So they see it as a threat. This is the idea of the product that I'm working with is about making sure that they're comfortable and knowledgeable and can actually use and operate and utilise the new kit that we've put in for them.
Okay.
So it's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, what's interesting for me is you're using a product mindset, it sounds like, to break down barriers for humans, overcoming fears or change, and from an organisational perspective to get a more significant ROI on what I imagine is an already significant investment.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and look, it's the nature of consulting, right? You're always looking for how you can do more work with that client. And if you can make sure that they love what you've delivered, then it's absolutely a benefit to us, but it's a benefit to the people who are actually there working, who may, if you think about the people that we're sort of disrupting effectively, these tend to be people who've been with the organisation for a long time. They're used to running like infrastructure, physical infrastructure, data centres, all of those sorts of things, and they've got long-lived knowledge about how everything works. And so it's really, the cultural change, you need to bring them on the journey.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the techniques, the plays that you've had to work through to really understand the problem significantly, and how you've then sort of worked through that product, multiple solution experimentation, hypothesis-driven approach that you mentioned earlier. What does some of that look like? Yeah,
so when I came in, someone had already kind of built out they talked. There was a model that they used for experimentation, and they'd got sort of 5 steps through the 27-step process. I looked at that and I went, okay, that's interesting. Certainly for my background and the understanding of where the knowledge in the organisation was, where they're on with that product. But really, I took it back to let's think about, okay, how I would actually launch a product. And I was just mucking around with Confluence, actually, right. Which is one of the big tools that everybody uses. And they've got a product launch template right. now, which is a new template in the Confluence. This is not an ad for Atlassian by any means, but I just thought it was really cool, right? And so what it had was all of the classic stuff that you would want if you were sort of defining a product launch, right? So it talked about what's your unique value proposition, what's your elevator pitch, who are your customers, what are the personas that you're impacting, how do you know that the customer wants it? All of these kind of things that you need to think about as a product person, all built out there in a template.
Right.
And so effectively I started basically just filling that out, going through and then iterating that with my manager and working through, okay, how can we make sure that we sell that to the rest of the organisation in a way that makes sense? And obviously there's a commercial lens to it as well. So there was a heavy focus on how, not just, what's the theoretical product, mm-hmm. but actually commercially, what does it look like, right? How many people do you need? What do they do? What are the phases? What things depend on other things? What are the inputs and outputs? It was quite low level and quite detailed. So I did quite a lot of that work, got the endorsement from my manager, and essentially what he said was, okay, now we need to step back and use a lean canvas.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So that's pretty much where I'm at the moment, is building out the lean canvas, so that we can sell it internally and then promote it through all of the internal partners, and then they'll be aware that it's a product that we offer.
Okay.
So between when I started in that 50-person startup and now, we've merged with a 300-person organisation. So it's kind of, we're sort of next level up scale,
right?
Which is why I'm sort of having to do that lean canvas, go back now and go, okay, let's build out a lean canvas, and so that all of the management of the new organisation can see what the value is in this product offering.
Right. Can I ask, you talked about filling in the Confluence blueprint or a lean canvas. Coming back to you starting in Confluence, and filling in a blueprint or a template can either be very easy or very hard, depending on what quality standard you set yourself.
Yep.
How did you establish quality or validate what you was putting into that Confluence template in that instance?
Yeah, so a lot of it was to do with discussion with people.
Okay.
So I knew that we'd had quite a bit of interest, and so I was pretty continuously bouncing it off our account management people. Right. So they're the people who are sort of on the ground and talking to the customers about where their challenges are and what the next things are and all of that sort of stuff. And really what was coming through pretty consistently was that they were all looking for something off the back of, hey, you've delivered us this innovation platform, but actually, and that's awesome. We love it. We love that we can now go out and tell people, and we use it as a recruiting tool because we are cloud enabled, and we can hire the best and brightest because we're not just stuck on our old infrastructure stuff. But really, it's about changing the culture in the organisation to actually use it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a really interesting, different conversation then, like how technology and tooling impacts culture. Could you talk us a little bit more around what you're seeing and feeling of that, what that means to clients on a day-to-day? You mentioned recruiting, for instance. How does that change the conversation? Yeah,
so certainly when you're looking for people in market, and they certainly look at the skills that as a recruiter, as an organisation who's recruiting, people definitely look at the skills that you're trying to recruit for, because that tells them what the organisation does and how it works, and gives a real insight at that tool level into what the day-to-day work that you're going to be doing is. I think it's made a huge difference to quite a number of the organisations that we worked with, where they'll be putting on, your Googles and your AWSs. They'll be saying we're absolutely cloud enabled, and so it changes the funnel of people who would even throw their hat in the ring and apply for those styles of roles. So that definitely makes a difference. I think from a day-to-day perspective, it also changes the way you onboard and you have people, coming into the organisation. And that's really where the product that I'm working on is a key differentiator. So the idea is that we as an organisation resell a product called Cloud Academy. Right. And that, anyone can go to Cloud Academy and sign up, and you can get access to a whole bunch of, all of the clouds have, quizzes and lectures and videos and labs and those sorts of things. Cloud Academy is quite good in that respect. The unique selling point really is that we would take that base level of knowledge and actually build specific modules that are tied to how it's implemented in your environment. So it becomes something that you can use not only to educate the people who are working there, but actually then when new people start and you're hiring, because you've got these new clouds, you're hiring for these new technologies, then you may have the people who have already got the certifications and the knowledge in those platforms, but then they can just go, okay, well, this is how we do it here.
Yep.
And
okay.
Yeah.
So that's the differentiation between your proposition and a AWS or Azure or Google Cloud certification, which is very generic, very broad. You're taking something and giving it almost a curation service that's specific to that organisation's needs and the people, therefore, within that organisation.
Yep. The other key differentiator, and this is really a big focus when we actually go out and talk to clients, and that is that we've seen things like guilds at NAB, right? So they started up an AWS guild.
NAB Bank, for anyone listening, is a big four bank in Australia.
National Australia Bank, yep. And I think, anyone who's been around technology for a while in Melbourne has probably worked there or been through there. I've been there a couple of times. They started up a guild around AWS because they were going to AWS as their first cloud. And I think they've trained more people than AWS on AWS stuff. So like literally a couple of thousand people. Right. But what that does is it benefits the individual, doesn't necessarily benefit the organisation. So certifications really become then about the individual and what they have, but it actually doesn't talk about how you can competently operate that infrastructure in your organisation. So we set up this kind of dichotomy about, certifications versus competence. And so we're really driving this competency thing, which is how can you make sure that the people you have working for you can operate the stuff that you've got in your organisation. Right. Yeah.
Okay. When I think about my own personal journey on upgrading, uplifting some of my skills, when I think about competence, it's easy to sit there on a computer and run for a 2-hour thing, learning something. I imagine the impact, though, is then the implementation of that competence on a day-to-day level. Can you tell us a bit about how do you measure that?
Yeah, so this is a really difficult thing, right? It's actually quite easy to measure. It's quite easy to measure certifications, right? Yeah. Because you go through it and you do it, and you either pass the test or you don't pass the test, right? And you get a tick, and then some exec at the cloud company goes, "Oh yeah, okay, we've got X hundred, X thousand people who are certified."
Yep.
Competency is very much a different thing. So it's really about building, and this is part of the way that we implement the product at the clients, is actually we basically run workshops with them and try and understand where their people are at, and then build learning pathways that are tailored to the people who we're working with and training. So they may take the form of, online labs or quizzes. Anyone, like you said, anyone can watch a video and that's cool. But actually the labs and quizzes actually test the knowledge. And then basically you can set up experienced people to pair with existing people, and they can verify the competency as well. So it's sort of, you get this sort of peer review thing happening, and then you've got shared knowledge, and if someone's new coming in, they can bring their new knowledge in as well and start to build that sort of guilds-esque community-based learning style thing based off the basic understanding of the information that we've delivered through the Academy product.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, I can appreciate the complexities when you get onto the human side. As you say, earning a certificate is possibly a vanity metric. Implementing the knowledge from that is more meaningful.
It totally is. And I think what we probably haven't done yet is talked to customers about what's the longer term metric, right? How, is it something like, and I'm sort of spitballing here, but maybe it's how many new things have been implemented in this platform that we've built, right? How many were you expecting? How many have you done? Right. And then it actually becomes, how are you utilizing this? Because it's really about return on investment, right? Yep. They've invested in building out this new infrastructure. If they're not using it, then it's wasted. There's no return on the investment. It's wasted investment. Yeah. So, that's probably where I think it's going to head. Right. In terms of how we would measure the effectiveness of the actual delivery of this capability uplift and the competency. Yeah.
Okay, let's switch it out. Let's talk about your development. So, I know you're big into the industry and reading, watching videos, studying, etc. Since I've known you, who are you enjoying reading at the moment?
Yeah, so there's probably one person who I'm really, really enjoying reading from a product perspective, and that's Melissa Perry. Right. So I saw her speak at Agile Australia probably 3 years ago, I think, from memory. And she talked about a thing called the build trap. And it's a really, really interesting concept. So basically what she's saying is, as a product owner or product manager, you're sort of incented to build out a roadmap of stuff. And, often as a product manager, the more stuff you have in the backlog, the better, right? More is better. That's what we always say. But actually, what then you can get trapped into is actually just building for the sake of building. And you go, okay, well, I know that, I have this product and I need to build out all of these different modules. But actually what you need to do is measure and it comes back to metrics and measurement and effectiveness. And it really aligns nicely with the concept of outcomes versus outputs, right? Yep. So, in my day consulting job, I'm often doing agile coaching, and everyone's like, "Oh, how many points are we getting through? How many points?" And it's like, that's a measure, but actually, you can do thousands of points of work that doesn't actually contribute anything to a product. It's kind of wasted time. Yep. So actually, let's look at the outcomes, which actually is the next level thinking, right? Like anyone can, you get a story, you point it up, you put it in a sprint, you burn it down. That's pretty easy mechanically, but actually thinking about, right, we're going to implement this new function. What's actually the key thing that delivers, right? How would you measure the effectiveness of that piece of thing? Is it increased revenue? Is it reduced churn? Is it what actual true business metric does it tie to, and does it support, and how can we link those two things and measure that? Yep. And her focus is very much on that, right? So focus on the stuff that has value. Don't just get stuck into this, right, well, we've got this stuff to build. Yeah, and we just build and build and build and build and build. Yep. Yeah. If
I think back to the original idea for stories from Ken Beck in Extreme Programming, it was to tell a story. I wonder if this is a conversation for another day, when people put points on story, they took away some of the purpose of it by making it a thing you need to burn through and get done, as opposed to change the world through software development.
Yeah. It's definitely a chat for another time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Who else do you look up to?
So there's a whole lot of people sort of in that sphere. There's another guy who I worked with who came out to Australia called Jeff Gothelf.
Right.
And he's written a number of books on. He's very much about user experience. So he's written a book called, I think, Sense and Respond. So it's very much on that sort of user experience side of software development. But yeah, he came out to Australia, and we had him out at NAB for a day to run a whole day workshop, and it was really, really interesting. So that was probably my first real experience of sort of service design and user experience, and how that all ties into the software delivery and software development processes. So he's a really, really interesting person, and he's very active on Twitter. So both he and Melissa I follow religiously on Twitter, and he actually does Scrum certification for product owners.
Right. Okay.
And so he's often around the world doing stuff on that and teaching people actually the mechanics of how to do it. So yeah, he's a really, really interesting guy.
Cool. Thank you for sharing so much.
No worries.
This has been good fun. Thanks for today. Thanks for sharing so much. We flew through that 25 minutes awesomely.
Yeah, it has gone.
Had fun?
Quick. Yeah, awesome.
Good. Thank you everyone for listening, and if you're on YouTube for watching. It's been good fun to get the podcast series back up and running. Loving giving it a Melbourne angle to get it started. Thanks to Keat Yong again for today's show. Thanks to Proud Mary for hosting us to do the recording and look forward to sharing some more product stories all with you again soon. Thank you.